Good evening. Welcome back to another edition of my Ask Me Anything. Been doing these since 2020, helping you guys reduce your risk of having a heart attack and stroke. Got a few questions tonight about vascular disease. I saw a question in there about methylene blue and my opinion on the new Surgeon General. So I'll jump in here and answer those. So how it works for those people who are new is that every Monday morning in my stories, I put usually a picture from some of my recent travels or something that's mitochondrial, heart related, background picture, and then put it in the box where you can ask me these questions. I had to go through them for the most part in order received, and these are often some of the same questions I get with my patients in my office. So if you are one of my current patients, this is a good way to reach me in between your office visits. If you're not one of my patients, then this helps you understand kind of our rationale for how we look at vascular health. We look at through the lens of mitochondrial health, look at through endothelial dysfunction, oxidative stress, inflammation lowering, and then yes, we'll definitely talk about lipoproteins because it plays a role. So for those that answer questions at a time, I will answer those first, and if there's still time as we're going through these questions, you can drop them in the comments as well. All right, first question tonight: is there a specific test to assess the need for Zetia? The direct answer is no, not a direct test that says you, quote, need Zetia, but there are some things in the Boston Heart diagnostic panel or in a GB Inside genetic panel that can tell you that is ezetimibe, which is the generic term for Zetia, a better option for some people than others. Is it useful if you have a poor result with statins, or is it enough? Typically, it's second-line therapy. The person is either not tolerate a statin or not getting to their goals on statin therapy, and you add ezetimibe or Zetia to the regimen to help with further lipoprotein reduction. Often works very well with even lower doses of statins. That's how I often will utilize it. Use the statin to work on the cholesterol production markers, which you can see on the cholesterol balance test on the Boston Heart panel, and then use Zetia to block the reabsorption of cholesterol in the gut. So if you have access to a Boston Heart diagnostic panel, it's on page 1, top right corner, cholesterol balance test. If the beta cetosterol and capacitor levels are in the red zone, Zetia usually work well for those people. And then if you have genetic testing, if you have an AP4 allele, or you have issues with lipoprotein lipase activation, oftentimes ezetimibe will work well for people. If you have cytosterolaemia, which I've seen a couple cases of in my career, Zetia works really well for those people. One of my favorite biohacks. So questions for jet lag mitigation. New York City to Spain. Can't sleep on the planes. Never a good sleeper ever. So don't know if that means never on the planes or never even at home. So at home, I'm an awesome sleeper. Been tracking my sleep since the Irwin came out, for 9 years. Sleep is generally going to be, mid 80s to 90s on my sleep scores. Jet lag mitigation is one of my specialties. So main reason I'm wearing the biohacker glasses. So first, download the app TimeShifter. Usually if it's your first trip, it's a free app to do. After that, you usually got a membership pay if you want more than one trip. Put it in your flight itinerary, and it will tell you how to start adjusting your sleep before the trip. You'll go to bed a little bit earlier, 2 nights before, and the night before you go to bed a lot earlier than you normally do, and then you're getting up very early that morning. Generally, probably they'll begin you up at like 3 a.m. on the day of travel, and then typically you want to be very tight with your light environment. So invest in a pair of blue blocking glasses. Generally, you want the yellow pair to wear during the day. Lenses that are red to block all blue light and green light at night. Wear them on the plane. Wear a watch ideally. Change your watch to, Spain or Stockholm time, and just start living like that the second you're on the plane. If it's nighttime where you're going, try to fall asleep on the plane. If you absolutely can't fall asleep on the plane, then do something that's, not highly stressful to your system. So, don't, really try to cause a lot of oxidative stress to your system. So do not overeat on the plane. Try to, if at all possible, limit or completely avoid alcohol on the plane to stop dehydrating yourself. Very well, you need to consider, drinking significantly more fluid than you're used to. Dehydration is one of the reasons you have such significant jet lag often. the glasses, I'm very, tight with my regimens, but, if it's unable to sleep on the plane and it's nighttime where you're going, put on the lenses that are red tinted and wear those, and watch TV or read until you maybe do get tired. The app will tell you, if you're somebody who drinks caffeine, what time of day to drink the caffeine. If you're taking supplements to help with sleep, it'll tell you what time to do those as well. And then when you get in your destination, it will tell you times that you should be able to get bright light in the morning, when you should be limiting that bright light, and it will help you get set up quickly. And then it'll reverse the process on the way home. I just did this for Japan. I literally had no jet lag going, 14 time zones ahead. Had some jet lag for 3 days coming back because I just couldn't follow the protocol completely with the sleeping earlier when I was still in Japan. But didn't affect my workday, just had me waking up earlier in the middle of the night than I'm normally used to. But back to regular sleep cycles in about 3 days. So good starting point. But yeah, if you go to one of my old videos I have on my YouTube channel, I go through the protocol much like this. But my YouTube channel is just drtwyman.tv. All right. Get this every once in a while. So, what I do for myself isn't what I would always recommend everybody do. But what does a day of eating look like for me? So when I got back from Japan, wanted to start tracking my macros a little bit more cleanly. So re-downloaded the Carbon app. You can also use MyFitnessPal or Macro Tracker or your favorite, one that you like to use. But if you don't measure, it's really hard to make a change unless you just kind of go by feel and scales changing. So tracking my macros, for the past couple of weeks, mainly focusing on optimizing my protein intake, shooting for 150 grams, currently weighing about 170 pounds. So high side, go for a gram per pound of ideal body weight, but usually get at least 60% of that. A little bit more fat than carbs, but shooting for about 2,100 calories a day to maintain. And then, I'm usually using a lot of eggs or kind of cheese or something like that for breakfast. And then throughout the day, protein snacks usually are some type of protein snack. Sometimes it'll be a protein shake. Typically for lunch and dinner during the midweek, usually use something which has the macros all kind of weighed out automatically, so I don't have to think about it. Use some various different services. Usually order them online, have them directly delivered. And then usually on the weekend, a little bit lightened up on my protocols. So not overly restrictive in what I'm usually doing. It's mostly somewhat of a paleo type template. Been doing that for 10 years. And so I usually tell people, like, if you can do it for a week, and you couldn't definitely do it for a lifetime, you probably shouldn't be, doing a lot of significant reductions and things that you could do forever. So, so this has been relatively easy for me. I don't typically have a lot of food noise or desire, and I definitely consider myself somewhat of a foodie and like food, but don't tend to overeat a bunch of stuff. So I don't have a hard time kind of pushing things away when I need to. But the macro trackers really help you understand if you're hitting the goals that you really need for whatever body composition goals you have. All right. So next question. So somebody says that they currently see me. They're, wondering about my thoughts on methylene blue. I did discuss this on last week's AMA. Methylene blue is interesting, and it's one of the oldest drugs there is. It was initially a textile. It's what blue jeans were dyed with initially back in the late 1800s. They ultimately found out that if they injected it in rats, it stained the brains of the rats. They would call it the magic bullet. That's why it's called MB. But it helps with mitochondrial energy flow in the presence, particularly of hypoxia. So can be useful when people have met hemoglobinemia. So when I was still invasive cardiologist and doing transesophageal echoes, sometimes the lidocaine hurricane spray could cause met hemoglobinemia in people, and we could use methylene blue to reverse that process. The biohackers now, with the blue tongues, that's what they're potentially doing, is using different forms of oral methylene blue, which works differently than IV methylene blue. So it really depends on why people are considering it. If it's something that they should think about is oral versus IV. Oral, it's, a really kind of a wild west out there. there are a lot of contaminants in some products of methylene blue. So I can't give any blanket dosing recommendations for people, because if you have G6PD deficiency, if you have something where you have an MAO inhibitor drug, if you have medicines that are raising serotonin and you do these medicines, you could significantly mess yourself up and potentially kill yourself. So can never recommend methylene blue on Instagram. This has to be something that you discuss face-to-face with your doctor, who knows your history and knows everything that you're taking. But if people are going to be biohackers, you need to know exactly what you're putting into your body. And there literally is fish cleaner out there that has methylene blue that people have taken in the past and got themselves in trouble with the heavy metals from it. All right, question. What are my thoughts on Casey Means as the Surgeon General? Not quite sure why people are so interested, pro or con. The Surgeon General is just somebody who tries to lay out the groundwork for the general population, but it's really the N of one. It's the person in front of you that you're really trying to help. So, I think it's interesting, but, have no opinion pro or con. I'll let her record ultimately, speak for herself. But, from what I hear, she has some concept of, what mitochondrial function should be. And she also, frequently talks about, metabolic health. So are generally good, positive things, but let's see what her track record will be. Is there anything to do a month until an aortic valve replacement to reduce the risk of stroke? Unanswerable question, because you have to know why the person needs an aortic valve replacement. How old is the person? What other comorbidities they have? Do they have severe coronary artery disease? Do they have heart failure because the aortic valve needs to be replaced? Is it being replaced because of aortic stenosis? Is it being replaced for aortic regurgitation? Is it being replaced because there's endocarditis and the valve is trashed because of infection? Thus, unclear exactly what the person would need to do. But in general, the person's exercise capacity, how fit they are going into surgery determines what the risk of having surgery is. You'd have to talk to your cardiologist or surgeon who's treating you for this to understand what your exercise restrictions are before surgery. But being physically active that you can be is usually a good thing. Trying to optimize your sleep, trying to optimize your sun exposure would be some of the low-hanging fruit things that I'd be considering. But it would really depend on what exactly the valve is being replaced for and how they're replacing it. Is it percutaneous? Is it open heart surgery? So those things would make a little bit of a difference. All right, how to start to get rid of fat around the heart and the organs. So this is known as visceral fat. First thing is test, don't guess. A DEXA scan or an MRI could give you that information as how many pounds of fat are around the organs. Generally one at less than 3 pounds, but optimal closer to 1 pound. There's not a diet you can do that's going to preferentially lower the fat just around your heart or your organs. You're going to do things that help with reducing insulin resistance if it is present. So optimizing your circadian rhythms, make sure resistance training at least 2 times a week, controlling your cortisol, mainly stress mitigation, meditate, biofeedback, prayer, exercise, whatever you like to do to manage your stress, and then sleep well. So 7.5, 8 hours a night would be a good start. Nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, probably would consider something like pioglitazone. Some interesting data that might help reduce visceral fat. So that's something that I would talk about with your treating doctors is, are you a good candidate for pioglitazone? And that's in person just thanking me for these AMAs. You're very welcome. Enjoying doing them every week since 2020. These always kind of keep me on my toes. These are questions I get asked routinely by my own patients, but sometimes you guys, will mildly stump me. Not common, but if you do, then I need to teach myself more so that I can teach you and then teach my patients, and also helps me stay on top of my game for my own health. So I appreciate you guys. All right, so I then got through the live questions here. So I'm going to double check, see if any questions popped up in the comments, and seeing some familiar faces. Definitely a few of my frequent people that I see at Apollo Cardiology. What do you do with a lean mass hyperresponder with high LDL, high HDL, and low triglycerides? So, great question. Yeah, I know a lot of people are interested in the keto CTA trial that came out recently. It's really the same story. It's, do you have endothelial dysfunction? Do you have plaque in your arteries? If you do, you need more aggressive management. If you don't have plaque in your arteries, you're not metabolically unwell, maybe you need less pharmaceutical intervention. That's kind of the main kind of tiebreaker for it. But if somebody came into my office and their values were significantly looking like these lean mass hyperresponders do, I will do a NMR, look at the number of particles they got, ApoB, look how much oxidized lipids they have. The cholesterol balance test in the Boston Heart Diagnostics tells us, is it a hyperproduction or hyperabsorption issue? And then you have to rule out a genetic cause. So if people have ApoE4 or they have issues with the way they break down fats, then sometimes it's the volume of fat that they're eating on some of these diets that causes this process. If they change the types of fats they eat, or maybe they're willing to consider taking ezetimibe, oftentimes you can mitigate a lot of the risk from the dyslipidemia from the diet. So I can't read this word. I think it's LPA, but it says, what do I do with a Lee? Maybe it's LPA. So LPA, genetically inherited lipoprotein, 20% of the population has it. It's like LDL, but twice as likely to damage the arteries. Look at oxidized phospholipid ApoB. Look at LPP2 activity. Look at interleukin 6. If those are elevated, more likely LPA is damaging the arteries. This is a question I don't know the answer to. The link between G6PD deficiency and heart health. I'll have to do some research on that particular one. But that's not something commonly I would see in my practice at this stage. Those patients generally present earlier in life and usually are seen by a hematologist. All right. Well, the questions have been answered. Hopefully that, guys, not only educates you, maybe every once in a while, maybe give you some entertainment. I appreciate your guys' time and attention. I appreciate your questions. Again, these help me stay on top of my game. I'm going to do some big podcasts in the next month or so I'll let you guys know when those come out. And if you need anything in the interim, always happy to answer those questions. Usually only on social media like once or twice a week, so it may take a few days for me to get back to you. But if you need anything, drop me a message. If you want to ask another question, my stories go live Monday morning, and then we'll be back here 6 p.m. next Monday night, that is. So have a great week, guys, and we'll see you next time.